mastery. Every ship, every commander acted as one. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. The battle that followed was swift and brutal. Dominion warships, larger and more powerful, were outmaneuvered by the sheer cunning and efficiency of the human ships. What had once been a symbol of the galaxy's power now found itself at the mercy of a fleet it had laughed off as a myth. As the first shots were fired, the Dominion's pride was shattered in an instant. The humans didn't just fight. They commanded the battlefield with an eerie confidence, their ships cutting through the Dominion's lines with chilling precision. The space around the fleet seemed to darken, as if the sky itself was bending to their will. The battle was not just a military clash, it was a rewriting of the galactic order. The Dominion's warships, once the largest and most fearsome in the universe, were helpless against the strategy of an unknown enemy. Their weapons fired, but the human ships responded with agility and calculated countermeasures. Their speed was unparalleled, their efficiency terrifying. For the first time in history, the Dominion's military had met a force that outthought them, outmaneuvered them, and overwhelmed them. The humans did not merely win, they dominated. Resolution Aftermath. The sky darkens, the myths live. In the aftermath, the Skis were no longer quiet. The battle had left scars on the galaxy, and the once unshakable Dominion found itself changed. The myth of humanity was no longer just a tale, it was reality, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The legends had darkened the Skis, and now the universe would remember. The Dominion, once the unquestioned rulers of the stars, now whispered in fear at the mention of the human fleet. The myth was real, and humanity had come for the stars. And as the human ships drifted toward the core of the galaxy, a final message was sent, a message the Dominion could never ignore. A message to all who had laughed, dismissed, or doubted. The myths are real. The legends are alive. In the dark void, the galaxy trembled, for it knew that the old stories were not just stories. They were a warning. The fleet that had once been laughed at had arrived. They laughed whenever the word human came up in the great halls of the Dominion. The High Council of Valeth, a civilization that prided itself on 9 millennia of uninterrupted rule, dismissed the idea with smirks and curled lips. Humans, that was a word from dust-covered archives, dragged from the oldest strata of fractured databanks. A term tucked beside legends of world spirits and sun-eaters. At the academies, young strategists used the myth of mankind as a classroom joke. In simulation halls, cadets shouted in jest, "Beware the humans," before launching their war games, followed by rolling laughter as their fleet projections wiped away the phantom enemy with ease. Even among scholars, the name carried only the weight of curiosity. Some claimed the humans were a cautionary tale invented by early starfarers, stories designed to frighten children about wandering too far into uncharted voids. Others argued the myth was a metaphor, symbolizing the dangers of arrogance. But to the warriors of the Dominion, it was nothing more than a tool of mockery. To believe in humans was to believe in ghosts. And so, whenever the topic arose, they laughed. Yet beneath those layers of arrogance, buried deep in their oldest sealed records, there remained scattered fragments, references to an empire that had once walked boldly among the stars. An empire that vanished so suddenly it became indistinguishable from myth. An empire that, if the whispers were true, left behind weapons so vast their shadows could extinguish suns. But that was only a story. And stories do not darken the Skis. A signal in the silence. The Dominion's frontier world of Kersh Prime was no stranger to anomalies. Pulsars screamed across its sensors every week. Rogue asteroids often flared against its upper atmosphere. Gravity wells, phantom echoes. Noise was the backdrop of life on the edge of the empire. So when the monitoring stations caught a deep band transmission pulsing through the void, no one paid it much attention. It was old, too old. Its structure resembled the long-forgotten communication codes from millennia past. Nothing modern used such primitive cycles of burst and silence. The technicians dismissed it as cosmic debris, fragments of some ancient probe, its systems decaying into static. But then the signal repeated, precise, structured, ordered. A forgotten algorithm began running on the Dominion systems, triggered by the strange format. Symbols appeared on the display, symbols that hadn't been seen in recorded Dominion history. The officer on duty stared. The glyphs were sharp, angular, burned into the console like claws across stone. She didn't understand them, but the database spat out an identifier. Language match human. Her mandibles clicked in unease. "That's not possible," she whispered. The others laughed when she reported it. A ghost message, nothing more. A trick of broken code dredging up forbidden words. And yet the signal continued, growing stronger, louder, closer. Until it wasn't just a whisper in the void. Until Kersh Prime's orbital sensors lit up with the silhouette of something vast, crawling from hyperspace like a predator breaking the surface of the ocean. The archive warnings. By the third cycle, the Dominion could no longer deny it. The object was no asteroid, no rogue freighter, no known vessel of any empire in the charted galaxy. It moved with purpose, its mass eclipsing the stars behind it, as though the night itself had bent into shape. The High Council demanded answers. Scholars were dragged from their libraries. Military strategists demanded clarity. And so the archivists, the ones most often mocked for clinging to ancient records, were summoned. Their voices shook as they spoke. They recited from brittle tablets and fragmented data cores that most had long forgotten. Descriptions of terrible ships, monoliths of black iron and silver fire. Fleets that traveled with silence yet struck like thunder. And one line that turned the council chamber cold. Where the humans go, the skies turn dark. Their fleets arrive not as ships but as horizons. The council dismissed it as metaphor, exaggeration, fear woven into story. But the scholars insisted. Every myth aligned, every tale converged. Humans were not conquerors by accident. They were erasers of doubt. When they arrived, their presence alone was enough to smother entire empires into submission. Still, arrogance remained the Dominion's crown. The High Council declared, "If it is humans, then they are only survivors, a remnant. We are the Dominion, we do not bend to myths." The chamber roared with applause. Yet beneath the echo of their own voices, none of them dared look out the viewing portals, where the distant horizon of Kersh Prime's sky was already dimming. When the horizon broke, the day the myth took shape, silence fell across the Dominion. Kersh Prime's sky turned black at noon, not from storms, not from celestial shifts, but from the rising shadow of ships. One after another they emerged, colossal constructs, angular and grim, unlit except for the faint gleam of weapon arrays that pulsed like the heartbeat of titans. They stretched across the heavens until the world's horizon could not hold them all. Not dozens, not hundreds, a fleet. A fleet the Dominion had sworn never existed. The people screamed in the streets. The soldiers in their barracks froze. Commanders choked on their orders. For the first time in generations, the Dominion looked up and felt small. Their greatest battleships, symbols of their eternal power, rose into orbit to challenge the newcomers. Vast carriers, bristling with the weapons that had crushed rebellion after rebellion. Their hulls glowed with energy shields thought unbreakable. They formed their proud defensive wall, confident the myth would shatter like glass. But when the first human ship moved, everything changed. It did not maneuver with hesitation. It did not pause to assess or measure. It simply advanced, slow, deliberate, inevitable. And as it passed, its shadow swallowed entire Dominion carriers. The fleet's commanders whispered in terror, "It's bigger than a city." Then came the voice. Not through open channels, not through coded negotiation, but through every Dominion frequency at once. Calm, measured, human. This sector was marked as ours. The Dominion fleet wavered. Their admirals barked orders. Weapons locked, energy surged, but hesitation poisoned every command. For how do you fight a story? How do you wage war against something your ancestors swore would never return? The silence before fire. The High Council's war table shook with debate. Half demanded immediate retaliation. We must strike before fear roots itself in our people. The other half whispered the unthinkable. What if we cannot win? Reports streamed in from Kersh Prime. The fleet did not attack, yet its presence alone crippled the planet. Power grids overloaded beneath the strain of their signals. Orbital stations flickered and died. Communication networks dissolved into static. And still the ships hung above, vast and unyielding, darkening the stars with their endless ranks. For 3 cycles they lingered without striking, watching, waiting, testing the Dominion's resolve. Until finally one Dominion captain, brash, desperate, arrogant, fired. A barrage of plasma lances cut across the void, striking the nearest human ship. The world below cheered. For a heartbeat, hope returned. The myth had been wounded. But then the light faded. The human ship remained untouched, not a scratch, not a ripple.